Yeah, as long as nobody's in your pictures, you can take pictures of the building, but you can't have everybody in it. Anyways, so that's the forensic side, where people who are found not guilty by reason of insanity, or they've been charged with a crime, but the court's not sure if they're sane enough to go to trial. That's where all those people go. Okay. On this side, all the way down, is the what we call the civil adult side. So there's 3 floors where we treat anyone between 18 and 50 on these wards. And then down that way, you can't see it, but is where we house the geriatric population and the
Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and why you took an interest in psychology?
My name is Dr. Randall Strandquist. I am a licensed psychologist in the state of Washington, and I've been here at Eastern State Hospital for about 13 years, over 13 years. I initially came as a forensic psychologist, so I did evaluations for the court regarding whether a person was competent to stand trial, and whether they were not guilty by reason of insanity and those kinds of things. How did I get interested in psychology? The standard answer that a lot of people give is, I'm really interested in how people work, and I'm good with people, and so I just decided to pursue my interest. And those things are true. I think a lot of it has to do with finding yourself passionate about what goes wrong with people, what goes wrong with relationships, and knowing that, what can you do to fix it? And so it's been a long journey. If you had asked me 30 years ago, would I be the director of psychology in a state hospital, I would have told you no. So, you know, things evolve as you go along in your education. And I discovered a lot of things in the process. When I first started, I was just going to do counseling. And then when I got into grad school, I discovered all about like neuropsychological evaluations. I learned about forensics, and it opened up a whole new world, and so that's kind of what I pursued for a while, was neuropsych and forensics, and then I ended up here.
So as you were showing us around, about how many residents do you have?
We average about 280.
Okay, and so is that about how many to a room?
Well, the wards are generally about 30 patients per ward, and most of them do share a room. So it's the setup is more like it's pretty kind of like a standard hospital where everybody has their individual rooms, but it's almost, when you see the patients there and interacting, it's almost like a college dorm. We have day rooms, and we do have individual rooms, but we just don't have the space to offer everybody their own individual room, just like any hospital.
Yeah, okay. And so about how many staff members do you have?
I'd say over 900. I think we hover around 900.
Okay. So after diagnosis, how would you go about determining a treatment for a patient?
Well, that depends on the difficulties that they have when they're coming in. So what happens is when a person comes in, usually they've already been at a hospital. So, for example, the police may have taken someone to Sacred Heart for an initial evaluation. And so they're evaluated at Sacred Heart, and either because they are what we call gravely disabled or a danger to themselves or others, they're detained at the hospital, okay? And then the law says that within 72 hours, a person has to be reevaluated. And the law is good. The law is there to protect everybody from those nightmare scenarios of, like Hollywood portrays, where somebody gets sent to a psych hospital and they never get out. There's a lot of judicial review. And so after 3 days, it goes before the court, and the court decides whether they need continued treatment. And if that's so, they usually get sent here, okay? And so when a person gets here, they're interviewed by a psychiatrist, a nurse, a social worker, a psychologist, and so they get the person's history and what symptoms they might be currently experiencing, and then from there they form the treatment plan. And it's kind of a collaborative process where everybody brings their ideas about what can help the patient, and then the psychiatrist is the one that's in charge of any medications and things like that.
All right. So, do you guys, does the institution still practice electroshock therapy?
No.
No? Have you guys ever practiced electroshock therapy?
You know, we have a museum, and it might be in there. I know that some facilities still use it, and initially it was kind of a barbaric kind of scenario. Nowadays, and again, I don't do this, we don't do this, but my understanding is that the person is pretty sedated when they go through it. The idea is that what they discovered is that people who were having seizures tended to not struggle with depressive symptoms, or after a seizure their depression got better. And so somebody put 2 and 2 together and said, well, what if we create a seizure in the brain? Maybe that'll help with depression. But it is by no means a practice that we do here. There are, thanks to the development of medicine, there are plenty of medications that people can use that bring them relief from their symptoms, and we don't need to do things like electroshock.
Okay. And so once a resident completes their treatment plan, how would you guys go about rehabilitating them to society? Right.
So what we focus on here is 3 things. We want everybody who comes through here to be autonomous, competent, and relational. And if anybody in society has good skills in all 3 of those areas, they're likely going to be a success. So autonomously, we can all function in our own areas of discipline. Teachers know what they do it well. Mechanics, whatever. Competence, you got to be good at what you do. And then relationally, generally we all have to work together, and get along. And so we focus on those things. And then, the other thing, which likely is the reason that brought them in here, is the severe psychological symptoms. Those generally, we focus on medications as far as remission of psychotic symptoms or depression, anxiety, things like that. So we're addressing the chemistry, we're trying to correct the chemistry of the brain, but we're also trying to teach skills that can make each person a success in society. And hopefully, the ironic thing about what we do here is we try and work ourselves out of a job. You know, one of the most optimistic things you can say to a patient is, I hope I never see you again, or at least here. And it's not being mean, it's I want your success. So we very diligently try to work on working ourselves out of a job.
Okay. And so, so do you feel like this institution is well equipped to help the residents at this hospital?
Yes, I think we offer a variety of services. We have occupational therapists who do things like working with people to develop practical skills. They evaluate for like independent living skills and things like that, to make sure that when we're considering placement that those people have the skills to the facility where we're placing them. We have recreational therapists because not everything has to be so like intensive therapy-wise. Sometimes having fun and just being with people and doing fun things can be very therapeutic. So we have occupational, recreational. We have the social workers that are creating avenues for people to connect in society, bringing those kinds of connections, and then of course psychiatry and psychology, again focusing on the three aspects I was talking about. And also the other thing that psychology does is assessment. So for example, we may get a patient, let's say a 50 or a 63-year-old man, and he appears depressed, but the fact is that it also could be dementia, because initially both those things present as the same. So the psychiatrist may ask the psychologist, and they may say, I'm not sure if this guy's depressed or demented, and I need to know because those are two very different medications, all right? And so we as psychologists can go in and do assessment and testing, and then from the data we gather, we can get a good idea of if it's depression or dementia. Sometimes it could be both, but so we do testing as far as diagnostic clarity, and then on the forensic side, we also consider whether people are trying to fake their way and get excused from a crime because they're trying to convince the court that they're crazy. So yeah, I think we've got a good team, and the perspective here at Eastern is that it's not only the disciplines that I just named. Everybody is integral to making this place work. We could not work here without housekeeping. We could not work here without the food staff. And so even though some people may have jobs that don't involve direct patient contact, we realize that without every person doing what they do, this place would not run efficiently, at least.
Okay. And roughly how many residents get released annually?
Most of them. I don't have any. I don't have any stats on that. Okay, maybe I spoke too soon about most. Look, here's the thing: is that we start discharge planning at admission. So we're setting. Not only are we establishing clinically what's going on and what we need to do to help, but what goals does the patient need to achieve to get released. Our goal is not to keep people here one day longer than they have to be. And now some people do stay longer, and most of those would be the people that have been found not guilty by reason of insanity. So the way the law goes is that, let's say I rob a bank, and it's my first offense, and I thought that the bank was the Church of Satan, and so God told me to go to the bank, take the money, and give it to the Catholic Church next door. So I'm found not guilty by reason of insanity. The sentencing range is 5 to 10. When you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're sentenced to Eastern State Hospital for 10 years. That doesn't mean you got to be here for 10 years. If you get better sooner, we're happy to, you know, reintegrate you back into the community. But you could be here for up to 10 years, or, you know, or whatever the law says is the maximum allowed. So some people will be here for the rest of their life, but those are in the very, very minority.
All right, and if you don't mind me asking this,
Sure.
What is usually the most common illness that leads to admission in this hospital?
Yeah, I would say people experiencing psychotic symptoms, and the other one would be suicidal ideation, a suicide attempt. Those are probably the two most things, because when somebody is psychotic, there's a breakdown in their ability to accurately perceive and interact with their environment. And inevitably, what that leads to is their inability to function productively in society. So those kinds of issues generally lead to them being hospitalized until they can be stable. And obviously, we know why a person would be hospitalized if they had tried to take their life. So those would probably be the two most common areas.
Right. And as we were coming to your office, we noticed barbed wire at the top of the fence. Can you explain to us kind of what that's there for?
You know, yeah, I know the area you're talking about. I don't. Because I think if we were to build that fence again, it probably wouldn't have it. So that barbed wire has been there longer than I have. I don't know when it was put up. Obviously, with the forensics, we all have secured yards in here. The forensics don't even have barbed wire. What they have is fences that angle inward, so that if someone were to try to climb the fence, they'd slowly be turning upside down. And then we also rely on our staff to keep an eye. So we have a lot of person security kind of thing. But no, we're not a barbed wire facility. It's just been there. I don't know.
And so how long has this institution been running for?
It was established in 1891, and at that time it was obviously a very rural area, and my understanding of how Medical Lake got its name was that the lake was believed to have medicinal properties. So if you soak in the lake, you're going to get better. And so I think that idea kind of carried over to, hey, if we've got a lot of people that need something else to get better, let's build our psychiatric institution here. It used to be huge. There used to be anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 people on this campus.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, they had their own chickens. They grew their own food. Nurses lived on campus. Several of the staff lived on campus. The governor, in one place around here, the governor had a vacation cabin up here, believe it or not. Not current governor, it's way, way old now. So yeah, there was a lot of people back in the day, but it's kind of transitioned down, because the goal of the governor is to make psychiatric treatment more accessible in the communities which we live. So if someone lives up in Chelan County and they need hospitalization, what we're trying to do is establish little mini hospitals in those communities so that they don't have to travel, you know, hours or whatever to get to their place. It's easier for their family to visit, it's more connected, and then it's easier for them to go back into the community. So bottom line is that we want people healthy and active and thriving in the community, and that's always been our goal.
Okay. And as we were coming in, we saw a few houses to the left. Are those staff member housings, or what exactly?
Okay, so yeah, you saw as you were driving in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you saw the cabins. I think one of those was the governor's. That used to house staff when they back in the day when staff did live on campus, and yeah, and then there used to be a school that's already been torn down. The cabins are, unfortunately, because they're kind of nice, they're scheduled to be torn down. But yeah, that's what you saw. That would have been housing.
Okay.
You were talking about the windstorm earlier.
Mm-hmm.
How has that affected the institution?
No, it was fine. Like I said, I think one of the things we learned is that we could use a little more backup power, and so we're in the process of installing new generators, and it was interesting. I mean, when we lost power, we didn't have any difficulty providing the basics for patients. I'm not going to say that everything was running smoothly because so much is connected to electronics nowadays. But we had a fantastic response from staff. We had people here, 24-hour watch. We have to make sure because, like, if we lose power, our fire alarms don't work. So we go on fire watch, and so every ward, every floor, there's somebody there with eyes on to make sure, you know. And then we have kitchen staff working overtime to bag lunches, and just everybody came through, and it was an interesting learning experience. But we weren't in jeopardy during that time. Fortunately, we got it resolved within a few days. So.
Did you have to transfer patients from one housing to another?
No, no, but we do have plans and we do drill for that. So if there ever is a need to evacuate, we've got that set up. And then we partner with community resources to bring in buses. We've got places where we would station them and things like that. So that is in our plans, but we didn't have to do that.
And as we were walking in through the front door, we saw the old school nuclear shelter. Where exactly is that located? Like the fallout shelter? The little poster? The little
Really?
sign? Yeah, there was a sign out there. Yeah.
Okay, well, you have to, there's a 0 level to the hospital, right? And that's exactly where I'd want to be if Spokane got nuked, because there's so much cement and everything that I believe that would be what they consider the nuclear. That must be back from like the 50s. I hadn't noticed that, but yeah, this would be a great. Ironically, it would be a really good place to be if Spokane got nuked. because all you have to do is go downstairs, and then the radiation that passes, there's no way it would get down to the 0 level. And we still use the 0 level. If it's really nasty weather and stuff like that, through the tunnel system you can get anywhere in the hospital.
So of the people who like actually are kind of like filing for insanity by not guilty by insanity, how many do you think are like actually?
Okay, so statistically, only 1% of the people that make that motion actually get it. There are times when how do I want to say this? It's not like the movies where the guy is really sneaky and then he turns around and says, "I fooled you all, now you've got to set me free." But there are times when perhaps it looked like insanity, but it was really drugs. And so we take those cases as they come, but we're pretty careful about our analysis and what we present to the court, and I would say 98% of the time it's legit. But it's a very, very few people ever meet that criteria.
Okay.
So, what do you do on like a normal day?
Yeah, it depends on how much staff I have. Right now, I'm down a couple of psychologists. I'm hiring, but what I do is I make sure that all my psychologists have what they need to do their job, be it testing materials or materials for behavioral programs that we set up, reward systems, things like that. I'm responsible for keeping track of the quality of the work that they do, and that includes the forensics. So I supervise the forensic psychologist and on the civil. Sometimes I have to go to court, and currently the federal government is working with us to refine our forensics program, make it more efficient. Sometimes I have to go to court and tell the judge how we're doing on that, what kind of progress we're making. I help out with the evaluations for people that are still here and staff thinks they need to be here. We call it an ITA. So it stands for Involuntary Treatment Act. And basically, I go and I evaluate the individual, and then I have to write a report to the court saying why I think they still need to be here or why I think they're ready to go. And then sometimes I have to testify in those cases. Some of my work is reaching out to the community, letting them know who we are as Eastern State Hospital, the resources we have, providing education. I went to Eastern Washington University, I think it was last week, and they had a mental health awareness event. I spoke at that. I go to the police academy, and this year I lectured on schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And the idea is it's not only police that go there, it's firefighters, it's EMTs, it's people that work at the bus station, and the idea is to educate people about what to anticipate for people that are presenting these kinds of symptoms, how to interact, things like that. And I think there's a general goal within our community to make people that encounter individuals with mental illness more prepared to interact with them, so that we don't have tragedies like we had with AutoZem and things like that. So we're all driven to expand our education, our knowledge, and I'm part of that. Let's see, what else do I do? Yeah, administrative stuff. But like I said, for 10 years I was doing the forensic evaluations too, and sometimes I do those, but that's only in cases when something needs to get done and nobody else can do it. So that's kind of what I do.
Going off education, you said the youngest people to be admitted were 18.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have like a classroom setting where they could still learn?
We do have an education department, and it is possible for people to work like towards their GED. Typically, though, they're not here long enough to make a heck of a lot of progress. So let's say the average stay for a person is 60 to 90 days. Okay. Well, I can pretty much guarantee you the first half of that stay is just trying to get the symptoms under control. And obviously, if you're psychotic or really depressed or things like that, you're not going to be able to study well. You're not going to be able to learn well. So that's not a valid goal. And then by the time they get better, we're wanting to place them out. So there are people that do work towards that, that are here on a more longer term basis. So it is possible. And we're trying to upgrade our system so that people have more access to internet sites that can help them move forward with their education.
Right. And I was on your website a little bit, but I didn't do much exploring. And it mentioned other hospitals. How many hospitals are in the Washington region?
Okay, so there's Eastern State Hospital, Western State Hospital, and the Child Study and Treatment Center. So, and then Western and the Child Center are on the west side, and we're the only state hospital on the east side. There are other psychiatric facilities, but those are private. So there's 3 state-run.
So are there any like accounts of like staff having like a disorder like from other? Just a question. You know,
Yes.
like
Yes,
something
we've
happened.
had that. Yeah, we've had that. We've had, sure, because you have to understand that mental illness, mental disorders do not discriminate. Any race, any gender, pretty much, you know, any age, there's something that can go wrong with your brain. And so, yeah, sure, by nature of the, you know, if 1% of the people in our society suffer from some sort of schizophrenia, the odds are 1% of our staff might. You know, so yeah, we have one of our patient advocates. He was a patient here, I believe, about 15 years ago, maybe 20, and he got better, and he came back, and now he works with the patients, and it's great because he can tell them, you know, I've been where you're at, I know what it's like, and let me help you get to the better side, and so he's been a great asset to our team. But yeah, sure.
All right. So in today's society, movies are always about some form of mental illness or institution. Do you feel that the directors and the films are at least somewhat accurate in attempting to portray the illness or institution?
Wow, that's. I think there are times when it can be. My favorite movie, for if you want to know what it's like to go psychotic, it's called Jacob's Ladder, and it's brilliant because you're watching the movie and you're kind of with the person and you're not sure what's reality and what's not, and that was a very good portrayal. I think in general the kind of cheesy Hollywood thing where you have the Nurse Cratchits wearing the hats and everybody's in white coats and all the patients are walking around like zombies, and that's not the way it is. But and I think another thing that Hollywood tends to do is associate insanity or mental illness with violence. And the fact is that someone with a mental illness is no more likely to be violent than anyone else in society. In other words, people are going to be violent because more than just because they're seeing things or hearing things. It's about their personality, and so mental illness does not make people violent. In fact, they're more likely to withdraw because they're in self-protection mode. And but I think one of the things that Hollywood has done as an injustice is kind of portrayed mentally ill people as dangerous. And but there's lots of examples. There's a show called Homeland that so they got this character Claire, and I haven't watched this season yet, but one of the seasons Claire is determined to catch these guys, and so she decides to go off her meds so she can go into a manic phase and solve the crime. Here's the thing. There's a brief window when somebody starts getting manic. There's a brief window of productivity, where you've got lots of energy, you've got clarity of thought, you're going good. And then the mania continues and it starts getting funky, okay? And so when they portray Claire as this, like, oh, she's such a genius, if she could only stay manic all the time, that's kind of a glorification of it, because there's a real downside to mania too. Can you think of any other characters that are popular?
There's a recent film called Split.
Yeah, I was going to mention
I didn't say that. I didn't see that. What's that about?
It's about a guy who has multiple personality disorder.
Uh-huh.
And he
kidnaps 2 kids and keeps them in a locked closet. And basically one of his personalities frees them, and then he has this superhuman personality that comes out and tries to kill everyone. Yeah.
Wow.
So, in the film, it portrays as though there's one of the personalities that has total control of the rest, that they fear this personality.
Okay.
And so there's several personalities ranging in different ages and sexes.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of them are attempting, like, they know the difference between right and wrong, so they're trying to free the girls, while the ultimate personality is trying to control them and the girls. So do you feel that this would be
Okay.
a valid
So-
portrayal?
So some psychologists believe that there is such a thing as multiple personalities. Some don't. I do. I've been active in the field since 1986, and I've only seen one case. It's rare. And that may be just because of the people I've dealt with. There could be more out there. It's my opinion, it's realistic to say that there generally is one central personality. Each of the personalities will have their own goals, they'll have their own desires, and that's interesting. I'll have to watch the movie. But the thing is that, again, it's like, how many multiples are violent? I would say very few. So just because you have multiple personality, and the whole idea behind it is that when the person was very, very young, they experienced really, really bad trauma. Okay, and so the theory is that the brain's way of coping with that trauma, it was so horrific that the brain says, I'm going to put that on a shelf in a book, and I'm going to store it right there. And you're not, as much as I can't tell you what's in that book unless I open it, that's how stored away it is. And so, but eventually then, let's say the central personality or so starts pulling out the books, and thus comes the memories, and thus comes the personalities, and things like that. I think it's a way that the brain copes. I think it's rare, and I think it's even rarer for someone to be violent and multiple. Usually they're getting themselves in more trouble than anybody else.
And if you were to receive a patient that has multiple personality disorder, how would you go about attempting to treat them?
Wow. I think most of the work, my opinion is that most of the work for their healing would have to occur outside here. It's a long-term process. So the idea would be is that you work towards reintegration of the personalities. And so, and then the central personality would be in charge of that. And so you start merging the personalities back into the central, and so it involves merging the memories and things like that. But that's a very long-term process, and there is no quick fix medication for anything like that. It's a lot of therapy.
In our AP psychology class, we watched a modern lobotomy take place.
Interesting.
It was in the 90s or so. What is your personal opinion on a lobotomy?
Okay. Well, look, if the kid is having a seizure disorder, sometimes, or at least, I'm not a physician, but one of the options for treatment is to split the brain in half. So you cut the corpus callosum, and you divide that connection, and for some kids that brings, that saves them from their seizures. As far as frontal lobotomies, what they're basically doing, and I don't know that much about it, but the frontal lobes are the directors of your brain. Okay, they're the boss. They tell you to look at me when I'm talking to you. They tell you what to pay attention to. They guide you in how to problem solve. They tell you what to start, when to stop. If somebody comes up to you and they have a really bad haircut and you're thinking, that is lame, and they come up to you, your frontal lobes say, do not tell them it's bad haircut, tell them they look great, right? So it's that counter, it's kind of like almost the seat of the conscience. So anyways, when you're lobotomizing, you're cutting off either part or whole of the individual's ability to have those kinds of skills. I think it can help. I mean, shoot. It's funny that you mentioned that, but I have MRIs from a guy who, and I don't know if you guys can see this with the camera, but basically, this vacuous part here is, he has no right frontal lobe. And yeah, and so he had to have it removed by a tumor. But one of the ways that we learn about what areas of the brain do what is we find out what they can't do or what's going on. So with this guy, what happened was the right frontal lobe, it tends to be the kind of emotional thermostat for our brain. So we call it like mood regulation. And so this guy, he was like, he had no clue how he presented, so he'd be like really intense, and he thinks he's being normal, and everybody else is like, But I mean, he was harmless, but his emotions tended to just be really intense and way up there or way down, and he kind of lost that thermostat. And then the other thing the right frontal lobe does is helps us with problem solving with nonverbal material. Right is nonverbal, left is verbal. And so you could see areas where he had difficulty with that, like reading a map and navigating how to get from point A to point B. You guys still remember maps? Okay. We're getting to the point where people are like, I don't know what a map is. It's kind of funny, but things like that. But his ability to speak and to think out words and things like that was all intact because that side of his brain was still there. So I don't know that I have an opinion on lobotomy, but quite frankly, so many things can go wrong with the brain, and if the difference between getting the lobotomy means that if you get the lobotomy, you may not have some skills, but you're not going to have to be in a hospital the rest of your life. You might be able to work. This guy worked. He had his own business. Things like that. Talking that out with the patient and saying, okay, here's the benefits, and so I think it can be a valid procedure. It certainly wouldn't be my first choice. It would be probably my last. It's like, is there anything else we can do? And if they say no, then you have to consider it.
And say a staff member's child or a family member is admitted to the hospital, how would that affect the work scenario?
Okay, so first thing, and we do have this happen. Cousins, you know, things like that, relatives come on. So the first thing we do is we take into consideration what is the best area for the patient. And if it happens to be that Mr. Smith, his brother, is a social worker on that same ward, then we move his brother to a different ward. We switch out. And so we'll take a social worker from, you know, same with psychology or any other discipline. So what we do, we'll separate that so that there's no conflict of interest, and so that Mr. Smith isn't worried about what his brother is learning about his treatment. We all keep that, you know, very, one of the things we take very seriously is confidentiality and maintaining that. And so making sure that there's no breach in confidentiality because somebody's relative is here and he's afraid that their relative is going to learn and then spread it around and things like that.
Okay. Do you guys have any other questions?
Do you think Hollywood's actually making facilities like this worse, like the image of them worse by the movies that they produce? Because I know a lot of movies, they show it as like a bad place. Do
Yeah.
you think it's making it worse for places like this?
Well, it's not helping. I wish we could take the whole public on a tour and show them what we do here. I'm very proud of it. I think, look, Hollywood has to make a buck, and they have to sensationalize. And honestly, nobody's going to go see a movie where, you know, people are, you know, socializing, watching movies, doing therapy. It doesn't grab it. And so by default of having to entertain, they bring in those portrayals. Generally, yeah, it's not accurate when they have to sensationalize. Unfortunately, it does perpetuate the stigma that people who suffer from mental illness are these either like dangerous or zombies, or, you know, the fact is that with early intervention and treatment, people can recover. And we've got a patient advocate who's the, you know, shining example of that. People can recover, they can be productive to the point where you wouldn't know it. And so it's a slow process of educating the public, and I'll leave Hollywood to entertain as long as we can keep that in our mind that this is entertainment, this is not reality. And so the more that I'm out there educating, or, you know, you guys or whatever, just to bring some balance to it and saying, okay, that's entertainment, this is reality.
Would you say that some people are reluctant to bring in someone with a mental disorder because of those movies?
Probably, and or the fact that they really don't know what goes on in a place like this, so they don't know where they're sending their Aunt Clara or whatever, or, you know, their daughter, or so I think it's real important for families to know where they're placing their loved ones, the care that they're getting, and I think it's perfectly normal to have hesitancy or be nervous if it's your first time and you don't know what goes on.